SKOR.com. Perfect for this Reckless Speculation Thursday.
Reckless speculation.
An article entitled New Year, New Takes. Here are 14 bold predictions for what the NBA will see in 2023 from this year's trade deadline all the way through to next season. And if you scroll down, so there's 14 things here. If you scroll down to number 13, the 13th bold prediction is the Minnesota Timberwolves will trade Karl-Anthony Towns.
Reckless speculation.
That's as reckless as you can get. Although we've done it before, so it's not.
It is aggressively reckless here. And so they have 4 different sort of, some of these are specific, some of these are a little more vague. But do you want to dive into these?
Let's do this. I've seen it, but yes.
And Judd, you're probably ingesting this for the first time. Declan sent this to us a couple days ago.
Declan sent it to us, and I did look at the Towns one, but that was last week, I think. So it's all new to me. I'm 53 old.
This is a safe space. If you're new to Mackie and Judd here on SKOR North, Thursdays are a safe space to recklessly speculate about our Minnesota sports teams. Sometimes we like to speculate in places that no one else would dare to speculate. And so sometimes people hear this segment or they hear a theory that one of us has and think, you guys this will never happen. There's no way something like this would ever happen, right? Well, if you look back in Minnesota trade history, a lot of crazy things do happen. Brett Favre, Jimmy Butler, like Kirk Cousins signing, like a lot of crazy things happen.
And the Wolves, I mean, to the entire season have been a mess. So like something's going, if they do not turn this around significantly, something's going to change. In fact, I would say that talk of a major Wolves trade involving Cat on a reckless speculation meter of like, red is like, oh my God, I cannot believe you're broaching this, right? And yellow. I'd say it's in the middle. Like it's reckless, but yeah, this one, they can't continue to play like this and not have something drastic happen.
Yeah. And now you can't trade Cat until the offseason. So these are all sort of look ahead here. And if you're triggered by the idea that like Cat is no one's saying Cat's the problem. I think there are questions now about this is Anthony Edwards' team. They traded a boatload for Rudy Gobert. Okay, like you're kind of in a spot where if you don't think the whole thing's going to work with all the pieces, then what's the best piece that could get you the most value to get assets back and to build around Anthony Edwards? And it would probably be Karl-Anthony Towns. Plus, we've seen him a couple times in the playoffs, absolutely meltdown mentally. So there's things there that make this plausible. And the article even lays some of this out. The article kind of goes to bat for him, saying that, hey, even though he had a couple clunkers in the playoffs, he had a 33.14 rebound game in Game 4 when they were down 2-1. Steven Adams, who's a big part of Memphis's identity, was deemed unplayable because of Karl-Anthony Towns, and so. The author writes that, hey, there's a lot of great things here about Towns, and these trade ideas are not an indictment of his skill or impact on winning. Instead, it's an act of desperation born out of a cataclysmic trade that never should have been made for Rudy Gobert. Having just signed an extension, Towns can't be traded till the summer, but this would be a great way to recoup some value. And so we'll start with this one, the Phoenix Suns. And this is the write-up. If a star becomes available, some combination of DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, and Cameron Johnson in a sign-and trade could be on the table, and those picks would be an attractive package for any team that isn't looking to bottom out. Think about Towns. What if the Suns offered Bridges, who makes about $23 million a year on a multi-year deal, Landry Shamet, who I think he was a first-round pick a few years ago. He just signed a $10 million a year contract. He's a shooting guard, three-point shooter. And as many unprotected picks and swaps as the CBA allows. So you get back a lot of the Rudy Gobert value. So you get, and Bridges, by the way, he's a really good sort of 6'6", 6'7" wing player, scoring 15, 16 points a game, shoots threes, energy guy, $23 million a year. Fairly reasonable. Minnesota may be able to find a better offer, but that one is damn good. Okay.
How much do you think that you can realistically get back in draft pick compensation? Because that's where you, with Gobert, I mean, that's where that trade swings things to be like, oh boy, now.
I think
how much
pretty comparable. I mean, Towns is he's a really good complementary player. He's one of the most skilled big men in the history of the league. The Wolves traded for Gobert, not looking at him as the centerpiece of the franchise. They gave up that much knowing he was a complementary piece. And obviously, like, everyone thinks they overpaid. They probably did, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think even teams going in, like the Suns would know that Towns wouldn't be the thing that we are building and we're hitching all of our dreams to. He'd be a good piece to our puzzle. These other teams, I guess there's a couple teams in here that might look at him as more of a savior. But I think you would get at least 3 first-round picks back, depending on the player load. There's a couple deals in here, like the Hawks proposed one next. I'll give you this one.
Okay.
Where it'd be less about the picks and more about the young talent that you'd be getting. So here's the Hawks write-up. A challenge trade with the Hawks that would swap Cat and Trae Young is one popular hypothetical. That's interesting. But what about Cat for John Collins, who's a rock-solid 25-year-old sort of stretch 4, like a 15-8 kind of a guy? Yep. $25 million a year instead of 40, right? DeAndre Hunter, who was a former number 4 overall pick just 4 years ago, but he's kind of underachieved with the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
Wing player. Mm-hmm. And 19-year-old AJ Griffin, who was the 16th overall pick this last year out of Duke. He's off to a pretty good start in his rookie season. So you get John Collins, maybe replacing the Cat role, but you don't have to run as much offense for him. He doesn't make as much money. He would just he'd be more of a complementary piece.
Yep.
And then 2 promising young players, one 19, one who's like 23, and a lightly protected first-round pick in 2029. It would be expensive for Atlanta, but as the team is at a crossroads, what choice do they have? You could go Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, and Karl-Anthony Towns and roll forward with those 3. The Wolves would have 3 good to very good players coming back who make sense around Edwards and Gobert and the 2029 first-round pick. Interesting.
Oh boy, what do you think of those players? What's your assessment?
Yeah, so I really like John Collins. The problem is anyone that you would put next to Gobert is a question because you don't know. You're going to bring in ultimately Collins isn't the lumbering 7-footer that Cat can be getting back and forth. I haven't watched every game that he's played, obviously, like I have for Cat, but I think Collins probably, if you deem that Cat and Gobert can't play well next to each other, Collins might have a better chance, can still shoot threes, not at the historical clip that Cat does. Will grab you some rebounds, but would generally, I think, come in as sort of a diet Karl-Anthony Towns, making a lot less money, and clearing room literally and figuratively for Anthony Edwards to continue to drive the franchise. Griffin and Hunter, they kind of fit with Anthony Edwards' age curve, so that makes some sense, and they fit right in with like, the Jaden McDaniels age curve, but you'd be sort of hoping that their stock rises, especially DeAndre Hunter, who's kind of at a crossroads of, all right, you're a number 4 overall pick from a few years ago. Are you going to be that guy at some point, or are you going to have to settle in and find a role as something far less? But it's interesting. I'll give you one more here real quick.
Okay.
Well, there's 2 more actually, but the Knicks want and need a superstar. Towns is exactly that, at least on one side of the ball. The issue here is how much they'd be willing to surrender and whether it's the best offer Minnesota can get. RJ Barrett, for instance, isn't the blue chip asset he would have been before he signed a $120 million extension, but the Knicks could also, in addition to trading Barrett, could replenish Minnesota's bare cupboard of draft picks by forking over several first-round picks of their own. So for the Knicks, it'd be more about, here's some of the draft capital that that you lost in the Gobert trade. Now you'd be getting it back if you sent Cat to the Knicks.
That intrigues me, I think, the most because of this. If I trade him to the Suns, I think Cat would have a chance of taking off and being great there because he wouldn't be the man there. So, like, he could fit in. And the Suns are incredibly dysfunctional and screwed up, but on the floor they're not, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm afraid if I got a ton of draft pick compensation back from the Suns, I would be not getting great first round draft picks because I think the Suns will continue to be successful. The Hawks trade scares me because it always scares me when you are doing trades that involve players and you know that you are trading the best player, Kevin Garnett. Like that's one where, yes, I get a lot of people back, but are they even close to being comparable to like one can take off? That's sort of risky. The Knicks are fairly just flat out dysfunctional at times, and they have improved now. But that being said, if I could get a ton of draft picks back from the Knicks, I think there's a far better chance that those would actually pay off with being decent picks. Where the Suns, I think you'd probably be in the 20s consistently. And I want the potential for higher picks.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Does Tibbs want Towns back though?
Tibbs didn't mind Towns. I think there was some frustration there, but like Tibbs got a lot out of Towns. And sure. Towns played all the games. I don't know that it's possible Tibbs isn't going to be there for the duration of like Towns' contract runs for like 6 more years. I don't know that Tibbs would be the coach.
I think you're exactly right on that.
RJ Barrett makes me a little nervous as the big contract coming back. He just signed. It's not as big of a contract as Cat, but he's another 6'6" sort of wing player. But he's a volume scorer type. He's not a great 3-point shooter, but he shoots a lot of threes. Maybe there's still more to tap into there, but his contract kicks in starting next year, an average of like $25 million a year for 4 years, which that's just kind of the going rate. That's like less than a max contract now. The sticker price in the NBA can be a little shocking sometimes, but this is what. If you're a rotation player in the NBA or you're a player that's a starting player, you're going to make like $20-25 million a year. Mm-hmm. And then there's one more here from the Ringer. The Magic. What if the Magic want to get frisky and get frisky?
I like that, frisky.
And offer Jonathan Isaac and Minnesota's own Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, this one could be fun.
And their own unprotected first-round pick in 2024, 26, and 28, plus Denver's top 5 protected first in 2025.
I love this one the most.
Banchero, you'd have Wagner, and you'd have Karl-Anthony Towns to make up the young nucleus of the Magic. So, Declan, you like this one.
I like that one the most. You're betting on young talent. You're getting draft picks back.
Yeah.
I don't know, them getting Towns, will that make the Magic better? Especially if they're surrendering all of the other young talent and future would that make Orlando better? I personally would love that haul. If you're just telling me if that's the haul I could get, all those guys plus draft picks, I think that makes the most sense from the Timberwolves to recuperate the picks they lost from Gobert. At the same time, you get some young stars. You can see if they fit or they don't fit. That one to me is the one that I would 100% pull the trigger on.
See, the Jonathan Isaac thing, just for the audience. So he was the 6th overall pick, I don't know, a few years ago. And he's been out the last 2 years with torn ACLs. So, again, I don't know. He's 6'11", 230, this freakish talent that maybe he still has a bunch of potential, but you haven't really seen him play.
Right.
So, and Jalen Suggs, a lot of us have watched him since high school. He's still only 21 years old. This is his 2nd season in the league. And maybe he would come in and supplant what D'Angelo Russell, sort of he can handle the ball when Anthony Edwards isn't handling the ball. And my question on Jalen Suggs is he's been a really bad 3-point shooter to this point in his career. In fact, for his career from the field, he's a 37% field goal shooter and a 23% 3-point shooter.
Ooh.
And so I just don't know. That reminds me a little bit of Ricky Rubio in a sense that, all right, if you can't shoot at all after like 2 or 3 years in the NBA,
right, you got problems.
What are we doing here? Or Josh Okogie, or who was the other dude? Chris, Jarrett Culver.
Jarrett Culver.
Yeah, him too. Chris
Dunn. Chris Dunn was a defensive stalwart, man. I don't know what you're talking about. He came in and locked things down for Tibbs.
Suggs has been a struggle fest. So this would be mostly about the picks and hoping that these young players that you'd be buying low on Suggs and Jonathan Isaac. So
what's the count on the picks again?
It would be, in this case, I think it's the most the CBA allows, right? It'd be 4 picks. It'd be 4 picks.
Okay. Yeah, that intrigues me the most. So it's interesting though because of this. I think if Karl-Anthony Towns goes to a place where he is not relied on to be, as Phil once eloquently said, the man, that's the best thing for Karl. I think if Karl goes to the Knicks, and I think the pressure would melt him. I really do.
The Magic would be great because Banchero's the man.
Yep. So we wouldn't have to be Phoenix. Probably would be good.
It's a good culture too, good system. They've built something that it's like the Phoenix and the Warriors are a different level, but like what San Antonio had, where it feels like it's more about the culture than it is about a guy saving the franchise.
And to go back to the conversation that we had probably about 2 weeks ago now too, the most important thing I think right now is to eventually get Karl back and find out, once he gets back, it's got to be go time both on and off the court to figure this thing out. And it's my contention that he will not be able to defer to Ant. This is Ant's team. There's no question. But that's a big thing for Karl, who, as we discussed before, has always perceived this as his team. But it's go time on figuring all of that crap out, because the first preference would be not to trade him. Have him fit in. D'Lo is gone. That's not a problem. He's gone. But you need to figure this out. I thought it would be done by now, and in typical Wolves fashion, it's not. But if you get to the critical mass of having to trade him, we need to know exactly we need to know exactly how it was going to work or how it worked out because of this one. You almost certainly are not going to win the Cat trade. There's a very good chance that he goes elsewhere, especially again, if he's not the man and is damn good for a long time. So if you've resigned yourself to this is not going to work because Ant is too important, the answer for Conley, for Finch, for the fan base has to be definitive.
All right, I'm going to rank these four hypothetical trade scenarios from the Ringer here. I think, I guess before I rank these, here's the question. The Magic and the Knicks, those packages are mostly about the draft picks that you would just be getting most of the draft capital back that you lost in the Gobert trade, but you'd be losing Karl-Anthony Towns. So how would you leverage the newly found draft capital to fill what Karl-Anthony Towns has given you, which is a lot of production, right? I mean, he is a great three-point shooter. He's a great offensive player. I'd want to know more about what do you plan on doing with the chips that you now have at the table to make this team, formidable around Anthony Edwards. And I just don't it's almost like you would trade Cat for the assets, and then I'd need to know what are you going to do with the assets? Are you just now you're just going to draft a bunch of players the next couple of years and kind of ride it out as a fringe playing team, or while Gobert turned 31 and 32. Mm-hmm. So those don't seem to fit with the timeline. They made the Gobert trade to win now. So then turning around and trading Cat for draft picks and then not trading those draft picks for another player or a bundle of players that are maybe a better fit than Cat or something wouldn't make sense to me unless you were also going to trade Gobert. So I think they would lean, in this scenario, I think they would lean more toward a combination of getting players that could help you now, like the John Collins or the Mikal Bridges, and a couple picks sprinkled in too. So from that perspective, I'm a huge stand for Bridges. So I would, there's something about maybe Bridges and Anthony Edwards playing together at the same time that really intrigues me. So I probably, maybe people would tell me I'm an idiot in the YouTube comment section. I'd probably lean that way, even though the draft picks are not going to be high draft picks. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you lean Hawks and you hope to tap into the upside of a former number 4 overall pick and a number 16 overall pick, getting John Collins. Yeah. And you also get a draft pick later on, but you'd be getting actual young players that currently exist. So none of these are the perfect scenario is Cat comes back, Anthony Edwards is now running the show, and everyone fits in perfectly. That would be the best case scenario. But if you determined after a month and a half, 2 months of Cat being back, you start to have those preliminary phone calls and start to lay groundwork for the offseason. But, I'll keep saying it. As much as I've had an issue with Cat and some of the emotional intelligence issues and just his general immaturity, if he could slot in as a clear complementary player with that skill set to what Anthony Edwards can be, that's better than anything you're going to get in a trade.
Oh, absolutely.
That is the best case scenario.
Yeah. And what makes this so intriguing too is that there's actually two conversations here. One is what you just said, which is we know that Ant and Cat can play together, but can they play nice? And can Ant or can Cat accept Ant's role now? Okay, that's the first thing, and that's a huge discussion point. The second thing is Gobert. Can Cat and Gobert coexist like we thought? That's where I need to find out too, because the sample size is really small. But it was at best, I think it would be kind to say it was a work in progress. Yeah. There were times where it didn't look like a work in progress. It looked like a struggle bus in progress. Yeah. So like there are two very important discussions here to sort out. And I don't think we spent a lot of the time in the summer talking about the Ant Cat thing, which is becoming more crystallized by the day. And I think we assume by now the Gobert Cat thing would have figured itself out. And that clearly, because Cat's been out now, has not taken place. And Gobert, I mean, I still want to know more about Gobert too, as a player. Like watching him consistently now, I guess I didn't realize what the limitations were. And I'm starting to get a better view of that now. And it's somewhat concerning for sure.
Yeah, it's I'm not, I almost feel like he's still hurt or something, because he's just not, he's not moving and dominating defensively in the way that he did in Utah. Yeah, so
perhaps if he hadn't spent his summer playing in a high level basketball tournament, he would have been rested. But I mean, what do I know? International competition, play for your country. That's fine. Screw your primary employer.
Hard to disagree with you on this one in particular.
Bleeping hate it.
Yeah. So, all right, let us know. Do you think would you consider any of these trade scenarios? Hit us up on Twitter. Hit us up in the YouTube comment section, the SKOR North YouTube channel. The more I think about this too, the Magic one. So the first round pick you would be getting is 2024. Like this year, they have one of the 5 worst records in the league. But next year, if they've got Banchero, Wagner, Cat, maybe they move up out of lottery status and sneak into the playoffs or something. Like, if I'm potentially getting a shot at a big time pick this year, but Orlando would, the first pick would be 2024. I don't really, the RJ Barrett contract. I don't know if I can do that.
No. Doesn't do much for you.
Jalen Suggs, like, dude, you can't shoot. Dude can't shoot. Anyhow, go check us out on Purple Daily too, where we did the state of the offense today, heading into week 18 and a random Viking of the week. And we'll have feedback Friday for you tomorrow on both Mackie and Judd and Purple Daily. Thanks for hanging out with us on this Reckless Speculation Thursday.